Here.
You look here too, and Councilmember Michael Forrester Rothbard, I believe he will be joining us, but he's not here yet. All right, did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from January?
Yes.
All right, and you
No
comments,
corrections? Looks good.
feedback,
Yep.
everything all good?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so minutes are approved, accepted. Okay, so for our first dive in here, we have our list of services, and I think that's really where we talked about starting off, was looking at this list and prioritizing this, right? Unless I'm forgetting anything else. But we've got that, and then we've got, talking about, how we wanna schedule, everybody for different meetings. So, does that sound like a good place to start, going over this list here?
So, Greg, did you make this list up?
That's the list that, yeah, I made that up in conjunction with the department heads 3, 4 years ago now. I'm trying to remember if it was 2021 or 2022, when we originally started talking about levels of service. That's a list of services we went through. I cut it down so we're just looking at the services, not all the, we had a bunch of objectives, different things that department heads have come up with that were addressing each of those different services. At one point, the council, we had like 3 or 4 3-hour plus sessions where department heads were here and explained to council members what they did, what each service was, what we thought our level of service was, and then we kind of had some anecdotal feedback from council members. I had them do a survey and fill out this rating, like on a scale of 1 to 10 or whatever it was at the time. Where do we think we are on, our level of service, like from just what you know about this, like where are we at? And then we talked about, do you think we need to increase this level of service, maintain it, or decrease it? And we had no decreases. We had all maintains and increases, which is not really surprising. So that was kind of the first step in our trying to develop a strategic plan. We've kind of taken a different approach last year with the strategic plan, which is also attached in the agenda tonight. So I think if you take that, you look at the services we have, hopefully that's what you need to inform the conversation about what services you want to look at closer. I think that's what we were going for based on the conversation last time.
Yeah, I mean, that was my impression, was to kind of go through this list, and it looks like, come up with some groupings, of things that we want to look at together, and then prioritize them, right, based on an order, and then decide which meeting we would go over each of the services at. Does that sound like what everybody recalls?
So, I guess going back to this though, Greg, so you've gone through this list and you're comfortable with this committee having this discussion about these services?
That is a list of every service the city provides.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had come up with some of the questions I had written down last time. Was we were starting off with what do we provide, but then getting more into those details, when we start to look at services like cost, use, and things like that. Welcome. We were just starting to look, there's a list of city services here. It was an email too, but we've got it printed, as well as the strategic priorities too. So, all right. So how?
I appreciated that list. That was a very useful document.
Yeah, and Greg was just saying it was made, a couple of years ago, and, this is a list of all of the current services, right?
Yep.
All right. So looking at this, is there anywhere that we feel, because I don't know that we talked about this last time, but is there anywhere that we feel like is a logical or a best place to start here? Or do we want to just go through this list and kind of talk about each area and where we want to?
I'd like to start right at the top and kind of work our way
Just
down
go right to the
through.
bottom? Okay, sure.
Yeah.
All right. So, and are we looking at this by service area then, and then we'll take into account each of the service categories within that? Would that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, so at this point, why don't we go through it and we'll determine if these are each areas that we'd like to look at, and then, if we do, then we can move forward with, how we wanna prioritize them, okay? So the first service area, arts, culture, and entertainment, it looks like it includes band concerts, historian, museum, public arts, special events.
And Greg, which department head would oversee this area?
This list isn't by department, so there will be some that are interdepartmental, that have more than one department that contribute to it, especially when you get down and talk about general government support, a lot of those things. Band concerts, city clerk and our recreation, which is under public works, are contributing to that. That's the summer concert series.
And does anybody know, I can look it up, but does anybody know off the top of your head what the cost for those out with the budget for talent, any costs that you think are associated with it, such as rentals, the band shell, maintenance, that kind of stuff? That's what I'm really trying to understand.
Yeah, I mean, these, again, in this case, band concerts, that does have its own code and budget, so you can look at that and pretty accurately determine, not counting any staff time spent on it, because that's not in that code, Carrie's time, and Steve Andrews' time, formerly Lou's time.
Right.
But you can look at that and see what the costs are.
Yep.
But some of these, you're not gonna be able to break it down. When you look at right-of-way mowing, there's no line item in our budget that breaks out right-of-way mowing.
Right.
It's just part of something that DPW does, so
Right.
you won't be able to quantify that.
Is it not possible, or is it challenging? Because I think the idea here, at least for me, is to dig in and understand what the cost of services is. And I know that they're not all, broken out with their own line, but I
Right.
think that that's valuable information, similar to how we did that when we went over the fee schedule. That's sort of what I'm looking for in terms of understanding what the commitment really is for some of these services.
Yeah.
So,
I think if you could pare these down to a handful or whatever
Sure.
number you think you want to really hone in on, at least initially, and we can start to look at that, because cost of service analysis is a very detailed, very in-depth, very time-consuming process. It
Yeah.
can take weeks, months sort of things, depending on how accurate you want to be with it.
Okay.
So if you can kind of hone in on some areas, we're going to look at this
Yeah.
closer, then we can start talking about what effort that will take and what
Okay.
timeline that can be provided.
that's good.
Right, so a good example would be the museum. So
Mhm.
I'm assuming we're talking about the house,
Sword Wilcox.
Sword Wilcox.
Wilcox, right?
Sword Wilcox. And so,
The house. I'm gonna tell Helen Reese you said that. I'm gonna haunt you in your dreams.
right, but isn't the vast majority of that budget subsidized through private donations? I don't think it really costs the city.
They have their own account,
But
correct? But
if
it
you,
does cost,
oh, go ahead, you're going to say the same thing. Go ahead.
it does cost with our staff, maintaining the building and, working with the Swart Wilcox, Francis Swart Wilcox, coordinating repairs and things like that.
We don't charge back for that?
We don't charge back. We used to charge back, and then a number of years ago, they had a meeting and decided not to charge any of the city's time to Swart Wilcox. It was eating up their funds too quickly.
So then on something like that, because I'm with Katie on this, is that I would like to quantify what that is, what those services are that we're providing to the museum, because that's a separate entity. We don't
Well-
necessarily own.
We do.
No, we own it.
We
It's
own that?
ours, yes. Yeah,
There's
it's
a,
city's.
the Friends of the Swart Wilcox House volunteer group, they actually recently became a 501c3. Obviously, they're attempting to raise money
Right.
for the barn. And so we get donations typically every year, smaller dollar amounts, but there's a fund that is, I think, has it always been funded our operating budget by that fund that
It
is
started
not
being-
general fund?
It started being funded by donations when they renovated the house. There was a big campaign to renovate Swart Wilcox House. Since then, and the general fund used to go towards it, and then, since then, because we had enough funds left over, we set it up into a special revenue fund for it to continue using for it.
So taking the barn as an example, there's my time a little bit associated with that. Ginny has time associated with that. Chris Yakubuchi quite a bit. Gene Russell and his crew, Parks, Buildings and Grounds. I mean, to add all that and quantify that and track that would be onerous, I think, in practice. If we were to estimate and say, roughly this much or that much, we can do that. But we're not gonna be able to go back to timesheets, you know, we don't keep
Oh,
that
of
kind of
course.
record.
Yeah.
And we won't, it's just it's just too much.
And it is city land, it is a city building, so if that special fund and those donations did not come in, then it would actually be accounted for in the general.
Right.
Greg, what if we like ignored sort of staff time? Like just, I mean, we can, you know, allocate staff time to the department that they're in and not worry about this department helping that department with something like this, and just think about other kinds of expenses. Would that be?
I mean, that's kind of how we do it now. So there is a Swart Wilcox line item in the budget, or series of line items that would account for those materials, utilities, any contracts, that sort of thing.
So, as we go through these, I guess, you know, what I'm thinking is something like that, you know, like a service that we wanna pull out, you know, to spend more meeting time in the future, going over, you know, I guess those are the kind of determinations we're making right now, you know, like how many of these, how, you know, is that one that we would like to pull out, you know, and discuss at a meeting in the future, come up with some questions, to get some feedback, you know, so that we can get some more of those metrics, and give the staff some time to put information together for us.
Right, for me, I won't know until we get through this list.
Okay, so you'd like to go through the whole list together and then we'll
Correct.
kind of hone in, sure, okay. All right,
So, one thought as we're going through it is that if we set some arbitrary cutoff, like, I don't know what it would be, like $10,000, anything that the total expenses are less than X amount of money, we can at least, if not ignore, at least deprioritize. So like, for example, I'm looking the total generated general fund revenue, for Swart Wilcox here. I just had it's like $15,000, $16,000. So just, I mean, I'm just saying I'm just using that as an example because
Yeah.
we're talking about it. So
okay.
maybe something less than $20,000, like we don't have to look at it in as much detail.
Right, but if you did look at it, you go to page 7 of our budget, Swart Wilcox, the maintenance, what Greg was just talking about.
Right, that's what I was referring to.
Right, trying to quantify it, you can see from 23 to 25, it's decreased by
Right.
$11,000.
Right.
And that probably has to do with a particular project we did
Yeah,
that year or another year, so
They
it,
had replaced shutters a couple years ago, and that was like 11,000 by itself.
Right.
So it depends on what repairs they're doing to the building, as far as how it fluctuates.
Right.
All right. Shall we keep going?
Well, I just asked about museums, but special events or public art or the historian, I mean, historian, the number is typically the same, isn't it?
They're a $2,500 a year
Yeah.
budget item.
I mean, that's pretty much a flat number.
Summer concert series, going back to that, they're an $8,000 a year expenditure. $6,000 is set aside for the performers. We set $1,000 aside for a kids' movie night each summer. That full cost is not always fully realized. And then it looks like we have $1,000 set aside for central garage, which I would presume has to do with the band shell for any repairs needed.
Gotcha.
So,
And we've kept it flat at $8,000 for a while then?
it looks like last year we budgeted 9.
Okay.
Yeah, it's gone up and down.
It's kind of fluctuated. We are down from last year.
Also depends on
On
the
page 6 of
relationship
budget.
you for
Page
the
4
movies.
and,
Also, I'd like to point out that for the number of concerts that the city expects to do, the budget is like very small.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
What is
It's
it,
very
page
small.
6?
I know that you
Oh,
make a
sorry,
lot.
it's the 6th
Um,
page in the PDF, but it's numbered page 3.
So that's something that I
page 3.
wonder if, so like in Norwich, they have a concert series and it's sponsored by MBT, I think. Is that something that
Gotcha.
we could seek sponsorship for or a partner, a public-private partnership with?
Right.
You know, Community Bank or Subaru or something like that. I mean, what are the or regulations
Well-
around.
Is it possible, I would guess that it's possible, but I do know that Subaru, like, they do the,
Fireworks.
Fireworks.
Sure.
and there's a lot of other
Yeah,
first night activities that people sponsor, so,
sure.
you know,
But-
I
So
think
you're saying
have-
we shouldn't do it?
Well, no, I'm not saying we should,
Okay.
I'm just
That's how it
pointing out
sounded.
that we already get a lot of.
They're very generous in
Yes,
their
we already get a
areas,
lot
but-
of support in other areas.
Yeah, absolutely.
But to flush that out a little bit further, is that something that maybe Parks and Rec could take on? Or
That's a fantastic idea. I love that idea. I'm gonna bring that to Parks and Rec.
So maybe
Yeah.
Parks and Rec could look at band
Developing.
concerts and public art,
I love that.
Yeah.
Developing funding for those things and
right?
partnerships.
Creating a public-private.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's
I'll write
just,
it down.
will require some clarification and just understanding that we can't solicit donations. That's
Right.
different than a sponsorship, but that's a
It-
key.
yeah.
Right,
That's
there's a
right for them
distinction.
To do the sponsorship, it's for them to put it on, and then we're kind of out of it, just like we are out of the firework
Right.
displays and things like that.
Right.
Which we're all very thankful that Ben Gunther puts on every single year.
Yes.
And I try to correct as many people as possible that say, oh, the city did a nice job with the fireworks.
No,
The
Ben
city
Gunther
did
did
not,
amazing.
Ben Gunther did.
All we did is
Give them space.
provide the police and pick up the trash, you know, like,
Yeah.
they did the
Well,
fireworks.
yeah,
They did the fireworks.
there's a lot of that, but for some
Well,
reason.
there is a lot on our,
Absolutely.
because we've got DPW and
Right.
public safety,
Right.
you know, we've got cleanup afterwards and prep
Right.
time
We-
before, yeah, so there's a lot
Right.
in the city.
No, we went through this, Mike, I think last year, and I think Brian brought, and Chris brought numbers at, was it 10,000 or $12,000 just for that one day the city incurs for costs,
Right.
so.
I mean, so, but I'm looking at the budget here, which is, it's page 3, page 6 of the PDF, but page 3, as it's numbered, which has all that, all the arts and culture expenditures that are in the, budgeted in 25 budget. Do you, as we think about this, does it make sense, what I said? Like, I mean, just,
Yes.
like
We are
say
spending our
$20,000,
time.
$20,000, like the things that cost more than $20,000 are recreation administration, which perhaps that's just staff time, I assume, I don't know if
Most
that's,
of that is
well,
time and supplies, yes.
you know, parks, baseball parks, swimming pools are the things, so maybe those are things out of recreation that we wanna look at, and not the smaller stuff, the historian that's $2,500 or, just an idea.
How does everybody feel about that? I think it makes sense to prioritize higher, dollar amount things. That's probably where we're more likely to, realize some areas for savings.
Yeah.
Shall we keep looking down
Yeah,
this list?
like brush and yard
Yep.
waste leads us right into an old conversation, right? So,
Just
Yeah.
talked about it yesterday, too.
what'd you come up with yesterday?
That the discussion really was that there's gonna be tracking of, the brush and yard waste collection this year. Correct, Greg? I think throughout the remainder of this year, so we get the full year's worth of, collections. And then, but no changes, are proposed for this year, until they get more data.
Okay. So they just wanna be able to collect how much time it takes?
I think it's more about the weight. Is that correct, Greg?
Yeah, it's more about quantity, how many, so I think we'll be able to track, how much we're collecting at the curbside pickup, how many different piles we're picking up. We may have a tally. I don't think we're gonna track down to the address, but we may have a tally. So this truck went out and collected X number of piles today, and when they weighed, this is how much we collected. So we'll have pretty good data about how much we're collecting. And also, hopefully, if we can work out with the county, Casella, to be able to have those who drop off and have a way to quantify that as well. And then we can measure how many people, two guys go out with the truck, how many days that they go out. We can estimate how much time we spend on it over the course of the year. And, week by week, month by month, so. April, spring cleanup, October, November, leaf cleanup versus the summer pickup. You'll see the trend, and that in the city, we can make recommendations or decisions based on that. Our general takeaway from the council discussion in the budget process was the council did not want to charge residents for pickup or collection or drop off in any way at this point. That wasn't really something that was supported, so at this point, it's really just a.
Yesterday they said that?
No, the general council discussion, we didn't have any vote or final decision on anything, but the feeling that I was gonna get, the feedback I was getting was, that's not really something we
Interesting.
were crazy
'Cause I
about.
would-
Well, I remember is that we didn't want the service to go away, but we recognize that there's folks that can't put the trash bags in their car, the leaves and stuff in their car to take it down. So those are folks that definitely need that service. So.
My recollection is that we had talked about doing like, more targeted cleanup more frequently in the spring and in the fall, and then potentially charging in like the in-between times.
Yeah, we kicked it out as far as trying to, that people want to buy certain, what was it, little tags or something?
Like the clink bags.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the click bags,
Oh.
that if they wanted more services, that they can pay for that. That's kind
Yeah.
of where we went with that conversation.
Yeah, and I
But
think,
then I
I
think
think
we-
when it came to QLIC, I think really what it ended up with was looking at this data to see how that, you know, works out, and the data was still in collection.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think we did end up with, we'll look into it.
Yeah,
You know, I don't
so
think we landed
this
anywhere
is one
specific
area
with
that to me, it feels like there is a method in place. I don't know, we may wanna, you know, let this one,
Yeah,
you know,
we
kinda
don't
go
wanna
with
duplicate
where it
work.
already is, you know, heading. And especially since that data collection is due to be concluded, really, the peak season for the collection, concludes after we're planning to conclude our work. So maybe we let that play out, you know, with, you know, where it's going right now, and, you know, quality of life and infrastructure committee is gonna continue to look at it too. So it will be coming back.
So, sorry to interrupt, we're
Yeah.
done?
No, I'm done.
Okay, I'm looking at the sort of the itemized part of community
Mhm.
beautification, which is page 54 in the budget. So the services that, I mean, we put 3 services down, so I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. Like, how do we,
Yeah.
is there a way to figure out what brush and yard waste collection costs?
It's
the
not-
city? Not really, because it's just
It's really
stuff.
not even captured in the budget under community beautification.
Okay.
Right.
I think when we categorize these services on the city services list,
Mm-hmm.
that's where that fell. I mean, you could make an argument that that could go under a different category, but in reality, this is DPW workers on the streets crew
Right.
who are paid from A5110, that's where their salaries
Right.
mostly
Yeah.
fall, not entirely.
So whose salaries are paid from A8510?
A portion of our parks, buildings, and grounds crew is paid from there. They're also split with the parks code,
Okay.
and buildings codes. So
Can I
they're
ask
allocated.
why we have a community beautification code?
Well, it's, New York State, their chart of accounts and their accounting manual instructs municipalities to report costs based on the type of service provided. And community beautification is just that. It is the planting of the flowers. It is, cleaning, you know, making your, Main Street area presentable. It's, you
So,
know,
so then
the-
sort of to Greg's point, I'm sorry to cut you off, we have quantified, we've done it during the budgeting process, approximately how much time people on DPW, because it's all under parks, buildings, and grounds, it's not anyone in finance going out and planting Main Street, although the garden club does that, but you know what I mean? So a certain portion, right, and I'm assuming even in the payroll software, right, you got your code and paid from the DPW code and a percentage and a percentage from the community beautification code, so is that an accurate reflection of the work and thereby the cost, or is it not? Does that question make sense?
Yes, during the budget season and the payroll process, especially this year, with the different classifications of the DPW groups, there's the water and sewer group, the streets, the parks, the buildings and grounds.
Yep.
So, Mike and I worked with, Chris Yakabuchi, and we came up with, educated estimates of how much time the crews work in the different
Perfect.
areas.
to an extent, I mean, it's only broken down by community beautification in the case of the Parks, Buildings, and Grounds crew. A 8510, A 7110, A 1620, 1621, 1622, and 1623 now, perhaps. So it's, but when you look at the list of services, there are a whole number of services that fall into those 4 or 5 or 6 codes.
Sounds
And
like
to
a job
extend
for
on that,
a
we're not
table.
keeping track of how much time they're working on this Fort Wilcox area.
Sure,
Or on community gardens.
Sure.
Or, you know, those different local locations.
sure. I mean, but to your point, could you say like, well, I do it once a month, it takes me about 2 hours, you know?
I think if we come down to, like I said before, if we come down to like a few that we want to hone in on, then we can start to think about, let's think about
Sure.
how we can look at this closer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, as we're trying to figure out, taking a step back and look at the global picture, in a way, yes, we want to do by service, not by department, but we can sort of assume that all these expenses that are in community beautification, they're largely DPW, so when we talk to the DPW department head, we can sort of think through, okay, these are the services you provide, where are there places that, you know, right away you could stop mowing, or I don't know, I don't know, I just pulled that off my head, but, like, I don't know if in this meeting, is it useful for us to figure out, I mean, the information we're asking for
Right.
future seems useful, but as far as trying to go
Oh.
through today,
Right,
I don't
no,
know if
that's
it's
not what
useful to try to break it down into the service categories.
No, and I think you're touching on exactly what I'm trying to get back to from the first meeting, which is my sort of main questions about these services are, can we figure out how much they cost? And then, you know, that was enlightening to me to see that salaries are broken out, you know, sort of based on how much time they're doing these things. And then also what departments they touch. So to your point that you just made, you know, this is largely DPW, so can we talk, you know, but some of them are many departments, like you had mentioned with general governmental support. So, yeah, I think just getting those 2 questions answered so that we can have a productive conversation, as you mentioned, in the future. It's just a matter of how we're gonna get that information in a way that is not, to Greg's point, onerous to city staff, you
Right.
know, but helps us understand, because we don't, you know, we're not here today, and we wouldn't wanna be, you know, trying to figure that out on our own.
Right. So,
Did you have something?
I just wanted to mention, when Chris gave the presentation a few years back, I think it was a 3-hour presentation to the members.
Yes.
I don't know if it's recorded on YouTube for that particular meeting.
I think the first one somehow wasn't, but the other 2 or 3 were, and that might have been
All right, 'cause
half of
that-
his stuff.
That
But
would have been a really nice source of, going back, because that was a beautiful presentation.
So we can see 2/3 of it.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep going.
Spare
Spare
well,
balance.
I actually have one more question about this.
Yeah,
So
sure.
for me, I'm looking at this going, there's 3 line items. Am I looking at this correctly? There's 3 line items for community beautification tagged into the budget. And I'm looking at the number moving north from 22 to 25 substantially.
that's probably it. It has a lot to do with the reallocation. So we didn't have a Parks, Buildings, and Grounds crew before. We had things allocated differently within DPW. It's changed a number of times since I've been here. So when you look at some of those things, you look closer on that, you're on page 54 still.
Yeah.
Look at health insurance, you know, why is that way up? You look at the personal services, the first line, you know, it's 48,000, now it's 114,000. That's not just raises, that's just the reallocation of time. So we're spending more time based on our analysis with Chris, like Jenny just explained. So that, in that case, it's not really
It's not the
You-
same
you can't just
department, is
go
what
by
you're
this-
trying to say.
yeah,
it's
Because it was
it's a
restructured.
different makeup. You can't say like, oh, we've increased 3 times. Yeah.
That was just one person in 22. Now in 2026, it's allocation of a team.
So that was between 22 and 23, so
No.
that happened 22 or 20?
I think that happened from 24 to 25.
Okay. So the cost budgets aren't useful as comparison.
Correct.
All right, so it
You
sounds
should
like,
do 2 questions.
there's some interest around this potentially. The next area of services are all under community services. And we've got a bunch of things here: community gardens, licensing, permitting, marriages, notary public, public information, vital records.
I have a completely unrelated question, so I'll let this play out and then.
Okay. What areas here do we have questions about, or is this an area that we want to
I'm
hone in
gonna
more?
assume that the majority of it, licensing down to vital records, is carried.
Yeah.
It sounds like it. And then community gardens,
Is that done by volunteers, or is that city staff
Well, that's
looking over them?
Cause that's also sort of community beautification, like, so Carrie's
Yeah.
office does the permitting.
the permitting for it.
I wasn't
Yeah.
thinking of the right word, the registration for it and all the associated work, and then
Chris's
DPW
guys,
does a lot for it as well. They do like the mulch and they mow around it and, yeah,
Or telling,
yeah. Yeah, they prepare it in the spring, right,
Yep.
for, yeah, so.
if they want it.
That's kind of a hard, so that one's
Mhm.
city clerk and DPW. But then also, like, well, you process the fees, but they go through the finance department.
Yeah.
So,
Touches on
That's cool.
multiple areas.
yeah.
Okay.
so Carrie, overall, your numbers, are they gone up, down, remain flat?
I think they're relatively consistent.
And you haven't restructured anything?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Help me out, maybe Ginny is the best person to answer this. As I'm looking through the budget, I see community services under a bunch of different categories, so I'm confused. Like if I look at the summary on page 3, what I see is,
Well, there's different types of community services. This area here that's listed here,
Yeah.
this is more of the generic, city hall community services
Okay.
that are provided.
okay,
And it's, what you're looking at on page 3, home and community services, that falls under, for example, that would be zoning and planning, things that affect the community building of its, the existence of itself.
so I don't see in the budget anything that's just community service.
No,
Right,
no,
so-
no, there's not just a department called community services.
Right,
Yeah, the services, the list of services, those service areas are not necessarily gonna match up exactly with
Right.
what's in the budget, like.
Right.
When we made the services list, we tried to make them slightly more obvious, or, we tried to make sure it made sense what service category was in what service area. Whereas to me, I guess home and community services, the way we reported the budget for the state's purposes, combines some very different things.
okay,
The services the city's doing related to community beautification, like we just talked about, shade trees, has very little to do with zoning and planning, and so we kind of broke those out a little differently
But
than the
it does
budget.
benefit the community as a
Right,
whole.
yeah.
So,
okay. Thank you, as I try to wrap my head around this.
Mm.
The next several are related to drinking water, lab testing, purification, source of supply, transmission, and distribution.
and all of this will be under the water fund.
Oh, wait a second. I might have asked- I
Page
might have answered
23,
wrong.
Ginny, is that correct?
23.
I'm so sorry.
Page 23 of the budget. Is that correct?
The summary's on page 4.
Water fund summary of expenditures.
Well, Mike, I think it was like on page 23,
Yeah,
like
it
the
starts on
laboratory
page
testing,
23. Well,
which they're.
the summary starts on page 23, the
The-
detail itself, starts
Okay,
on
I found it.
page 57.
Okay.
It gives the breakdown of
Right, right.
change, which is helpful for me.
Jenny, can I ask my unrelated question? The 112% increase in the debt service interest, is that because of the ban for Market Street?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything we wanna dig into here with the drinking water budget?
also do like testing, and I don't know how we wanna incorporate this, that department in particular, and I know that some of them, like Chief Knapp has mentioned ways that the department, is looking to increase revenue based on the services that they provide. So, I know that they do like lab testing up there, well, the lab testing is, like, it also provides revenue, I guess is what I'm saying, it's
Yeah.
not just a service, so it will be interesting, I think, to compare. I'm sure it's a, I don't know, we just have to take everything into account, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
There is a budget line for the lab testing.
Okay, and the revenue as well.
$80,000 for,
Is that the
and
expenditures?
it's $50 per test.
Okay.
Can I make a suggestion? Just
Sure.
in thinking about this at this stage, maybe don't compare to the budget right now. Maybe just look at the services list and say, okay, drinking water, laboratory testing. Like, I'd like to know more about how does our revenue compare to the testing we're doing? Do we need to be doing all the tests for outside agencies? Or what might we conceivably do different that would potentially result in cost savings? And let's dig more into that.
Gotcha.
Or like
More
band
interest revenue.
concerts, in that case, going back to the top, simple one, do we wanna do these or not?
Right,
Or can we get a sponsorship or something like that?
right.
Museum, like, wanna sell the Swart Wilcox House, for, redevelopment, I don't know. What else are you going to do with that? And maybe,
That's both of us, Frank. We're in trouble with Helen now.
Uh-oh.
I'm trying to throw out examples
I know.
you could easily brush aside as that's not realistic. So you might be able to check, push some aside, like that's not what us really looking into. We're not trying
Okay, I
to
see
get
what
rid of
you're
the
saying.
Swart Wilcox House. We like
Yeah.
the band concerts.
I gotta agree with you on this one,
Yeah, that
Craig,
makes
because
sense.
comparing it to the budget, like transmission and distribution, it's a service, we do, but there's multiple parts within that budget to get to the transmission.
Right.
distribution.
Yeah.
And we're not even 20% down the page.
Yeah, no, that's a good
page
point, and I
one,
keep
so-
looking, I'm like, how do we get this, so, okay. So let's take a
More
bigger picture look, I
generic.
guess, and
Sure.
we'll keep going through this, and
Okay.
then we'll come up with our,
I would like to look at street sweeping, please.
okay, where are we at with streets? Oh, it's
It's
right
under
there, it's right there, I
environmental.
see it, okay. Mhm. We're getting there. So street sweeping is an area of interest, okay, with environmental, is
Particular interest to
there?
me, yes.
Yeah, no,
For a long time.
are there other areas in this environmental area that are of particular interest? And we can go through and maybe just do like interest areas and then kind of check back in and see where we're at, you know? Does that sound like a good idea at this
Sure.
point?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, although it still would help me to know, like, I don't have to go item by item, but in general, it seems like most of these would be DPW.
Yeah, street
services.
sweeping.
Department.
But no, I mean, but like in the whole environmental section.
Oh,
Well, we have a volunteer running the deer
Yeah, they do,
management
yeah.
right now,
yeah, for the most part,
and it doesn't, I
Yeah.
don't think it's costing us anything, is it?
not really. I mean, some staff time, working with Susan on that. Solid waste collection, obviously, we're not, that's just the city, the cities, the parks have solid
Right.
waste collection as well as downtown, and then the city buildings, that's done by DPW. Although many municipalities have solid waste collection where they provide that service, that's not something the city does now. I don't think we're here talking about trying to add services, but,
Right.
you could consider that as from
That's
the
where we can make
city,
money from.
the city
Yeah.
viewpoint. How does the city handle its solid waste? Well, it's mostly privatized.
I maybe wanna talk about solid waste,
Okay.
cause I think there are some interesting things that cities are doing with regard to that, and it's not even necessarily adding the service, but it may just be an area to dig into a little bit.
I'm kind of starring them
Now
now,
that you've mentioned
so we
it.
can come back.
I just
Sorry.
wanted to add, Charlie says that a garbage truck is the most expensive truck to maintain.
No, not us providing the service, I hope that's not what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
that's not what I'm talking about.
I thought the city has control of waste, and so we could actually divide the city up and bid it out. Is that not correct? If you,
We'll dig
if you
into it.
rolled it over
Yeah.
and you did, I guess, provide it as a service. But then you could bid it out. I know where my one son lives, the entire city, which is 10 times larger
Yeah.
than Oneonta, that's how they do it. So the city technically is providing the service, but then they bid out the city streets to waste haulers.
I see.
And then, I think where they used to live in Bloomington, it was like other street. So their streets go on for miles.
Okay, so that's the kind of thing that we
But
could dig
that-
into.
there's an
Yeah.
opportunity for revenue, because I believe the municipality can control solid waste.
And so, and then the homeowner pays the city for the, or does it go into the tax rate? How do you?
It goes on their taxes, but the city is reimbursed by the hauler, because they're bidding on each street.
Interesting. Okay.
Like the county has, the transfer station is owned by the county,
Right.
but operated
They
by
have a
the
hauler, right.
That
They have
makes
someone
sense.
doing it.
So it sounds like that's an area to spend some more time on. All right. Then going down through the environmental, then we get into a lot, there's a long list of general government support, so let's look through this.
There's so much there.
Yeah, there is so much assessing
Um,
assets. Yeah, go for it, if you've got something that you'd
I
like to
was
start with.
just thinking, maybe we can think about this a little bit in terms of direct services versus kind of like outward facing
Yes.
versus inward facing.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Well, the assessor is not a good example of shared services, right? Because we partnered with the county to
Okay.
do that.
Yeah.
Is there any state money available for that shared service?
I don't believe so. I think, I mean, as far as the grant for.
Consolidation.
Well, I mean, it was a big push. I thought it was still out there with New York State
Yeah.
for municipalities to partner for shared services. And it doesn't, I don't think they dictated what the services were, as long as you were actively doing it.
Yeah, it was like consolidation.
There was discussion about a grant program that I don't think has
Yeah, I don't-
been something we were eligible for or has materialized.
I can check to see if that qualified, but I don't, I think there had to be a certain amount of savings to be qualified, and I don't think we hit that mark. But I can look and see.
All right. So what other areas here with general government support? So we start assessor.
What are we looking at for asset management? Are we talking physical assets or?
I mean, that's just something that, so we have assets, yes, physical assets, infrastructure, buildings, equipment that we have to track. Part of what Tyler Technology, that software would provide with respect to DPW in particular would be an asset management software that we don't have now.
Oh.
Obviously, we have our assets in our financial accounting software, and that's something that Jenny has to report on.
Oh, really?
But, you know, we have GIS in DPW now, that's asset management. So it's just a thing that we do. We have assets, we have to manage them.
Yeah.
How exactly we do that could be a discussion, that's part of the Tyler thing.
Yeah, you raise a really good point, which is that some of these things, like if this decision on Tyler is impending, understanding how that will impact
Yeah.
some of these things, I think is really critical to any decisions that we make here. So, especially because it's a really big investment, in time and money. So, I don't know how best to integrate that into the conversation, but I'm glad they brought it up.
Are there any others on this first page here that we want to dig into?
Yes.
Cash management? Are we allowed to invest?
We are allowed to invest, but it's restricted on how we do it. Everything has to be collateralized, also has to be very low risk. So mainly it is in securities such as, we're a member of the New York State class portfolio. And then we also, we have money market accounts with the different banks, interest-bearing accounts in different ways. And so we've got to make sure, we're not allowed to like invest in credit union, it has to be a federal bank. And we're not allowed to invest like in the stock market. That New York class will do that for us.
Right, so is that on your desk, all those decisions? We don't hire a third party to manage?
Yeah.
But just so you know, last week I was working on interest income, and all of the funds, for in 2024, restricted and unrestricted, we got over 815,000 in interest.
Nice. I have questions about effectively all of this general government support stuff. Just, you know, what it is, like some of it, you know, but then also, I think, are there opportunities to do shared services for some of these things? I know, I had mentioned to Dave Corey about civil service with the county, and I know he had some thoughts on that, so maybe understanding that a little bit better. Even if it's not something that can be implemented now, like, do we set a long-term goal that potentially we could integrate something into a shared service? I don't know, I genuinely don't know what, like, the Drug and Alcohol Program Administration looks like. So for this, for me, sort of to Mike's point about internal and direct services, like, some of these may be a direct service, but it seems like these are maybe more, rather than by service, these are best explained by department. So like HR and finance, maybe, because we sort of have a hand in everything, just answering those questions.
Well, I will share with you that we were actually talking with Alan today as far as shared services for HR with the county, and he said that no, it's not something that we want to do now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember. But
And
could we
also-
talk about like long-term,
Yeah, The Drug and Alcohol Program Administration, also that's very big for OPT for our bus drivers.
Right.
And that a lot of that is handled through the OPT. They have to actually be certified in that, and have the credentials to, do the drug and alcohol testing.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would like to learn more about like almost all of this stuff personally.
So I'm making a note too that maybe we just, have a time, maybe we even start off like your
Where we just, like,
suggestion.
have questions.
Yeah, with just HR, finance, but.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, and what's great about that is, like, your departments kind of touch everything. So, I think it will be helpful to understand that as well.
Okay, so I think that's a good one for us to consider, maybe even for the first one too, just to kind of give our grounding, let's
I-
keep, go ahead.
Yeah, does anybody have any thoughts?
One question, insurance claims is,
That is when we have a claim against the city, or the city has a claim against someone else. So it's when we're, working with our insurance carriers for our liability insurance. Say, for example, a bus gets in a car accident of some sort.
Right.
Or somebody hits a streetlight, it's those type of claims.
okay, so the service part of it, is the processing of the.
Yes, there's a staff member in finance that will coordinate all of those claims via the city clerk's office, and they'll, coordinate that with our insurance agent.
Got it, okay.
As you pointed out, a lot of the general government support ones are internal, not so much external. They're supporting the external,
Yeah.
outward-facing
Right.
services. We can't do those services without the internal stuff.
Right.
But needs to be captured somehow. It's
Right.
a lot of what we do.
I think, generally the things that come in front of us for explanation or approval or whatever are those like outward facing things. So I think some time helping us understand kind of the mechanics of, of everything is really valuable. So I would appreciate that a lot.
Okay. All right, so continuing on the list, the general government support goes on to the next page. Start off with payroll, another one of those things that we gotta have in the background, right? Very important, and we've got a bunch of recruitment, retirement, timekeeping, all of that in
Well,
here.
and so
So,
again, this is something where I think Tyler comes really into play. Like, I know that, right now, the payroll system that we have is not ideal, and, we're going forward with something else, so talking about where we are, but then also, like, what those improvements might look like, I think would be really helpful.
Right. As
Where
you
it
said
might
earlier,
impact.
It's a substantial investment.
Yeah.
And then there's a substantial amount of annual commitment to it, subscription, so.
kind of noting these things that we wanna know more to kind of ground this conversation, the shared services, Tyler, kind of those overarching kind of themes, okay?
Right, but I think it should be denoted that Greg and Ginny got us into, with regards to our health insurance, got us into a health insurance consortium, which will at least flatline our health insurance costs.
What?
slow
That-
down the.
that
We
is-
were hoping, yeah.
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 That is the general premise, which is kind of it's a big deal, because I know from my time on council, we're always looking at 20% or more
Mhm.
rise in insurance costs, so, except for 2020, I think.
Yeah, the first year that we got into it, it actually saved over 500,000 citywide. For
Right.
the health insurance. And, which was a huge cost. And then if you think about that, it also saved in future increases, because what it did is it decreased our starting point.
Oh,
So,
right.
so
Yeah.
the percentage increases on our starting point will now be smaller, because we were able to save that.
Right, but and if we look at the line item below it, we actually don't have that as, do we have that as part of our budget? Greg, do we actually have IT? Is that a budget line or a line item?
Yeah, we have, well, it's not called that, it's called computer communications, or where does pyramid fall? I forget what. Shared communications.
Shared
Yeah,
communications.
so we
that's
have
what
a
it's called. Okay.
contract.
But we really,
IT.
aren't we gonna not expand, but kind of reclassify that into IT and really truly understand the need for it? Or are we always gonna have a third party? Are we,
Not necessarily always, I mean, it could be an in-house thing, but I think there's a lot of value to having a third party, especially for a municipality our size. There's a number of, individuals working for Pyramid with a lot of experience who work doing this stuff every day. I don't think we could hire a staff that we would feel comfortable with doing it just for us.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's called shared computers. It's on page 37 of the budget.
right?
So with regard to some of the contracts for some of these things, like, so Pyramid, you mentioned that that's a third party, it's a contract, like, this reminds me of something I wanted to ask during legislative, but another time. Where are we in that contract? And, obviously it goes up for renewal, and this is sort of a needs question, but are you satisfied with that service? Do we do an RFP?
We just did, a bid on it, I wanna say 2 years ago.
Okay.
So we just renewed with Pyramid a couple years back for a 5-year with, 3 possible, 1-year extensions for that. And, as Greg said, there's a lot of benefit to having the whole team. And
Sure.
I'll let Carrie jump in on it too, because she's one of our main contacts with Pyramid
Yeah.
for all of our computer. Carrie and I work as partners, and with dealing with the city's computer issues. And, but she is much more technically savvy than I am at it. Having the Pyramid team, if one person is not available, there's someone else that could fill in.
Sure.
They also have a lot of protections for us that are constantly being monitored 24/7. And, if we just had one in-house IT person, I just don't think that would be possible.
Yeah, to be clear, that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just asking about Pyramid specifically because they're the vendor that we have right now. And, I don't know, I'm just trying to make sense of how that's going,
It's
basically.
amazing. I could call probably 3 or 4 of them right now, and all of them would pick up.
Okay,
They are reachable, they are responsive, they are knowledgeable.
okay, cool.
It's very satisfying.
And the prices are very reasonable. When we went out to bid, the other companies were much more expensive than Pyramid. And they were shocked. They looked at Pyramid and said, how can we do it for that price?
Right. Okay.
And Pyramid, if you're listening, I like your price.
All right, let's keep going.
Yeah.
I just want to be sensitive to, our time too, especially for our staff moving here for multiple meetings. Okay, but going beyond the general government support, we've got the Parks and Recreation comes up next. Several, are listed there, athletic facilities, maintenance of the parks, recreational facilities and programs, trail networks,
Yeah.
anything
I mean,
here?
Brian, you don't have community paramedicine up and running yet, do you? Okay.
Some of those are wish list for public safety.
Yeah.
Parks and Rec is kind of I feel like it's a little bit deceiving because it's like 5 things, but there's, some of those things are very expensive, like recreational facilities presumably encompasses the pool.
Madison
not.
Field,
Yeah, domestic field, right?
playing fields, all that.
Yeah, so,
Right, that's like asset management.
asset management. Where do playgrounds fall in this list of services?
Say, parks
Facilities.
maintenance, recreation facilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be an area of interest, it sounds like, right?
I mean, to me, always.
Yeah. I know they all are. We just have to pick our, top, right? Just so we have some focus areas. All right.
Recreational programs, is that like the summer program, the
I would say the only program we have now, recreational program, is the YMCA operating the pool and the swim lessons. That's programming as opposed to just, otherwise we just provide the facilities.
I
right?
would say too, like, unless it's in here somewhere, there's like, we have, like youth programming through the teen center, right, that's in the budget. Right?
Where do they fall?
I'm guessing recreational programs. Where was that?
It should be for 7 through 10. It's on page, it's on page 52, new programs.
Yeah. Oh, interesting, we have that under, well, culture and recreation, I guess.
All right.
But does culture and recreation include parks?
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess as far as things we're interested in exploring, like parks overall, not a specific service category here, but I mean, when we meet with parks, just. So, put that on the list.
I mean, these are big quality of life things for the
Right.
community, so I think
Yeah.
they're worth looking into for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, and I know that, just to be like transparent, one of the things that I hope to support in this role is like expanded, recreation opportunities for kids. And we have a lot of organizations in the community that are stepping up, but I definitely wanna keep that on the forefront of what the city can provide as well. So, like, I know that we have, a few things here that we do support financially, but I hope that, as we begin to prioritize, that's something that, it's not necessarily listed on the page, that we keep in mind the things that we think will benefit the community as well in line with the strategic plan. So.
All right. Got planning and development next. City planning, business assistance, city planning, developer assistance, housing assistance, ordinance inspection, planning and zoning compliance.
Of these categories, I would be particularly interested in assistance to businesses, developers, and housing.
Yes.
Not just talking about what we do currently, but also like big picture, what's possible.
Yeah, I think that's, we hear a lot about that, right? Especially like, what are we doing to help businesses, what are we doing to support housing development? So, absolutely.
When I have
Yeah.
the opportunity, I want to put a report together for the council to show how many grants that we have provided for the downtown merchants over the years.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, in my tenure, and I don't know how, I can go back very far if you wanted to, it's millions,
Yeah.
millions of
Sure.
dollars. It's-
Yeah,
so-
and I don't think anybody's refuting that.
No,
Yeah.
but I just think it would be an interesting report.
Right, and I
to-
think
to share.
one of the things we talked about last time is that, this is an education process that's informing for us, but that we can also use this to inform the public as well. So I know we've noted that any kind of visual charts, right, things like that are really useful tools. So anything that we get here that we can share with our constituents, I'm sure would be really
Yeah,
helpful
I
too.
just think it
So-
would be an interesting
Yeah,
report to
absolutely.
share with everybody.
Yeah, because I think to highlight the things that we are doing well, you know, if that comes out of this, that's great too. All right, so the public safety and health, we've got a whole, you know, bunch of stuff here too. So where is it that we'd like to kind of focus in here? You know, I see we even got some areas where we've got, you know, subcategories as well, you know, so.
Ryan, do you want to talk about hospital transport?
Yeah, that's the one that I was thinking too then, thanks.
Just, that hasn't panned out, so we've, let our fourth ambulance go at this point.
Okay.
I don't know if it'll ever pan out, but still something that I wish would happen, but.
So it's a wish list item, it doesn't sound like there's a budgetary item for us to review quite yet, is the
Right.
impression I'm getting from what you're saying? Okay, so it's not really something to star, but it's something that, you know, we're still hoping, you know,
Yeah.
will pan out.
It's like one of those things that's,
Yeah.
it is on the page, but
Yep.
like, you know, eventually,
Yep.
just to keep it on the radar.
Yeah, all right, any other particular items here that we'd like to focus in on then?
I mean, I guess I'm curious to know what are the big ticket items here.
I mean,
Well, I think,
public safety in general
Within public
is a big
safety?
ticket item,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I mean, the bread and butter is EMS, fire protection,
Mhm.
hazmat.
Right,
Those guys do that every single day.
right.
but in terms of expenses, right, it's personal services, it's overtime for providing these
Yeah.
things. So this might not be one where the services are what we wanna dive
Oh,
into.
what you wanna
It might
look in.
be, yeah, more about facilitation of the services
Yeah.
and how that works, and
staffing
how that
hours,
impacts
yeah.
your department. I know you've mentioned that overtime's been brought down based on the realignment and addition of people to your crews, so we can kind of understand that more.
So it sounds like this is one where maybe we don't wanna hone in on specific services, but maybe look at the more overall staffing patterns and how that's impacting the cost of services.
Right.
Okay.
Cause it's not like, not that we're here to cut things, but it's not like there's anything here that we would say like, oh, that feels unnecessary, you know, so it's more about
Yeah.
how can we figure out, work with you, help to make these things be successful long-term without burning out our public safety staff.
Exactly, like I'm just thinking to the conversation we had around budgeting this year and like looking at, you know, how we looked at the numbers, right, for overtime for the police. And then we looked at what it costs to hire more police to try to alleviate that, you know, and that comparison was a really helpful exercise. So,
Right.
okay. All right, moving right along then, the transportation.
Sorry.
Just
Oh,
wanna-
yeah, I'm sorry, do you have
No,
more?
yes.
Go for it.
Just one question, so which of these categories are under like code enforcement?
Safety inspections.
Yes, the 3 safety inspection at the end, and also up under planning and
So
development
there's
ordinance
something else, right?
inspection, and planning and zoning compliance. Those are
Yeah.
the main
Okay,
code enforcement.
okay, thanks.
Hmm.
All right, as far as.
Oh, I'm sorry, I had one more
Oh, yeah,
question.
go for it.
I'm just writing a note. Gosh, I hope I can remember what it was now. Shoot. Facilitating these services. No, it will come back to me.
Okay, yeah, we can always
Thank you.
come back to it. I'm not trying to rush us, I'm just trying
No,
to keep us
that's
moving
good.
along.
Thank you.
Transportation then goes into a lot of stuff, airport, bicycle infrastructure, ooh, that was talked about last night. Paratransit, parking, pavement, sidewalks. Oh, and that actually continues on to the next page and goes through everything else, snow and ice and street and traffic and transit. Several subcategories there. So let's talk about this area.
Actually, can I go back to
Yeah,
my one thing,
please do.
which is about, I know that council has been very, supportive, I would say, of like hiring additional staff, like adding positions to public safety to be able to, you know, get staffing up and make things easier approval for public safety has been challenging. I think it's been going well, but I know that like in the past it's been challenging. So talking about, I know that like recruitment and retention, which is a key phrase, I guess, is on here. I'm assuming that's about employees. But just talking about during that conversation about facilitating the services and making them smoother, more successful, whatever, that facilitating staffing should also be sort of part of the
Yeah.
conversation, understanding what that looks like and what we can do to support that. Thank you for letting me get that out of my brain.
So I guess I'd be interested in knowing more about the airport. And then as I'm looking at the back of the budget summary, like roads and snow and ice removal are those, is that what falls under pavement maintenance? Is
Pavement
that-
maintenance, well, and then snow and ice control is its own, right?
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
separate for that.
Well, I can tell you on the airport, had some very productive meetings, looking at different opportunities, partnerships, and in the coming weeks, we'll be doing a presentation to the county council on those very things.
Okay.
So
Okay,
there's
great.
gonna be some shifts in the airport.
All right.
Cool.
I know that's been in conversation for a while, so that'll be good to get that update. Were there other ones here though that we wanna, I know we've got some, attention on parking, I don't know if that's another area that we wanna,
Yeah, I'm glad that it's divided into off-street and on-street.
Yeah.
State recording and
Is it really?
really,
Oh.
interesting.
I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
I think all of these things kind of goes back to that like park culture recreation thing. Like these are the things that people see and
Yeah.
they really care about. So I don't know that breaking out like one or two of them to
Right.
look at really is the best idea because I think that they all are felt by residents and
Yeah, like I'm
you
thinking
can't like
like.
make a change to one without impacting another really,
Mhm.
so
Oh.
that's kind of how I feel about that.
Though I wonder, just looking at the budget, it seems like people care a lot about it, but it's not, because it affects quality of life, but it doesn't affect the budget that much, right?
Yeah,
What's that?
no, it's so
Like-
expensive. Streets
Well-
and sidewalks and snow and ice maintenance, it's.
Oh, yeah, that stuff, yeah, I was
Yeah.
talking about parking, sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
gotcha,
park-
gotcha.
yeah.
No, okay, I meant the,
Yeah,
I guess
the-
it's under
the road
transportation,
maintenance,
but all of that infrastructure maintenance as a
Oh,
whole.
Right.
no, a parking lot definitely costs the city.
Oh, yeah. Parking costs money. It's
Correct.
not, you know, when people
It's
talk
not
about
free.
free parking.
Right,
Pay
I'm
for
just,
such things,
Yeah.
right.
I'm just looking at the
Um,
budget, it's like off-street parking, $52,000 was what's in this total budget. But I have no idea what that covers and what that
We
doesn't.
should talk about it, I think.
Yeah.
It's such a hot button issue.
Yeah, it
like,
is, and that's
having
fine.
a public conversation about
Yeah.
costs around parking makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I would like a conversation on parking, and I also like a conversation on transit.
Oh, please. I have so many thoughts and feelings about OPT. And actually, in my neighborhood group, that was like one of the main things that people wanted to
Really?
talk about,
Okay.
public transportation. And
I'm
just-
curious, what, like,
Oh, just like getting it to be utilized more. I think
Yeah,
there's a
great.
desire in the community for it to be utilized more.
Yeah.
So figuring out like what those pain points are to make it more
Awesome.
user friendly or whatever. Yeah.
okay. All
So I
right.
would love that.
All right, so we've gone through the whole list and we've reviewed everything, come up with, I think, a couple of ideas. I think the next step that we talked about doing is, you know, kind of looking at, you know, what meetings we'll have coming up in the future and determining in what order we wanna look at these, you know, where we wanna start. And from our discussion, am I getting that we'd like to start, oh, here, you know, with the discussion with folks from HR and finance, and starting with that big picture kind of thing, you know, with, how our, you know, talking about, you know, potential with, you know, some of these shared services, Tyler technology that's going to impact multiple areas. Does that make sense as a starting place?
That's fine with me. You know, when I look at these things, I can kind of see, I think we have the most maybe to talk about in the general governmental support
Yeah.
category. And then probably DPW after that. But I think it's worth looking at the services that we've highlighted and
Yeah.
which departments they touch so that we can try to coordinate, like if it's, you know, DPW and
Yeah.
code enforcement, that we have them here on the same day.
Right. And I think it would be, you know, the more efficient we can make it, so that we don't have DPW coming like 4 times, you know,
Right,
if we,
exactly.
you know, kind of.
Yeah.
So do we wanna, just to have someplace to start, do we wanna start with, HR and finance next month? What do we wanna do?
Well,
Well, wait a minute, finance though, you're kinda getting into your big season.
I'm always busy.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure end of the first quarter, second quarter is kind of
Yeah.
a busy time for
So is there a better time that would be, I mean, cause maybe we could have HR and then, I mean,
I'll make it work depending on whatever the council, whatever the council wants to schedule it. It's okay. It depends on how much information you're gonna want from me. So, as far as how much detail I have to provide. But
It's just more initially, more in-depth discussions of what these things are. Like if we're talking, when you say finance HR, are you talking general government support?
yeah,
issues?
yeah,
Like basically all of them, because obviously that
Basically all of
involves like every department.
Right.
So it might be a conversation with a number of department heads here
Yeah.
to chime in.
But what I can do is, I can actually write up a narrative on what the finance department does, for, you know, all the job functions that we, all the production that we do. It'll be a little lengthy, but,
I don't know if that's,
I
I can write that up if that helps.
don't know if it's
Unless
worth.
you don't want that much detail.
I don't know, well, I don't know
I
if it's
think you
worth the
have
amount of
to,
time that it would
yeah.
take you. It would be helpful, but I don't wanna push you through that necessarily.
yeah.
it's probably easier for us to just ask questions about certain things. I think if we could think of maybe any of those questions in advance, so that you have, you know, supporting whatever that you wanna bring, maybe, that would be
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, and that was
But
part of
rather
our-
than trying to like shadow box our questions, you know, if we can try to provide them to you, that's probably a better use of your time, right?
All right.
So,
Questions for finance before the next budget?
Before the next meeting, do you want them with at least a week's notice, 2 weeks?
Whatever works out for you is fine.
Okay, I mean, if we give you 2 weeks, then you have more flexibility in terms of fitting it in to answer? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because we haven't really gotten to that, you know, this point right now, but what we had talked about was having, you know, this list and then being able to develop some questions at a meeting,
Right.
you know, so that they could be, you know, prepared for the next meeting.
We did talk about that.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe we just start with HR next time, because I feel like that will help us think about.
The format.
So HR and kind of think about that overall. So then as far as, 'cause I know we're,
Questions?
yeah, I'm just looking, so if we do that for March, right? And then I just wanna kinda get our schedule laid out too, so
Sure.
that we don't have to keep doing this each time, right?
Right.
So then if we, you know, ask HR next time, so then for April's meeting, is that maybe when we wanna have some questions developed for finance for
Sure.
that meeting?
Because we could have the questions by the next meeting. and
Correct,
you
yeah,
have a
that's what I'm
month with them.
thinking.
Is that better? Okay.
And
Yeah,
then,
given Jenny's schedule, I think that she needs 30 days.
Fine.
oh yeah,
Totally.
yeah, and that's why I don't wanna, you know, we wanna, you know, keep this ball moving, but at a pace that is, you know, that people can keep up with. Okay, HR, finance, I heard DPW come up quite a bit.
Yep.
Is that one that we should maybe put on for the next month, for May?
DPS in May?
DPW, sorry.
Sure.
I would say,
Where else are we heading?
the
Yeah, go
only
for it,
thing
Katie.
I wonder is, what do I wonder? DPW has a lot of overlap,
Mhm.
so is it worth trying to coordinate DPW and OPT or central garage or at the same meeting? Or do we feel like DPW at one meeting, well, cause the other thing is, like, for me, OPT is probably a full meeting.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I don't
That's
know,
what I'm
I mean, I
kinda
think when I look at the enterprise fund and the OPT operating budget, I have a lot of concerns. So,
I mean, if you're looking to combine something with DPS, I would put engineering, because Chris is in charge of that also.
So DPW and
I mean, do we have questions for engineering?
engineering.
I didn't see any in the list of services.
Excuse me.
Engineering, it's in,
Yeah. It's in
Under general government support.
I see what you're talking about.
I know it just came up last night, we were talking
Sure.
about what's available, right, for, for those, traffic stuff, or the traffic studies.
Right, okay.
so,
Okay, so if we're feeling like OPT is gonna be its own meeting to maybe put them down for June?
can we kind of hold for scheduling it out, because I'm with Mike on this, is that I'd like to see how it goes with HR.
Kinda start off.
Questioning to kind of get the
Yeah.
format down before we kind of schedule out.
I'm
'cause
okay with
I
that.
think
I
it's gonna
love to
move.
have things kind of like known ahead of time, but
like
we
3
have
months.
we have some basics here.
So one thing that I'm thinking about is like, if we're gonna have any impact on next year's budget, we probably wanna schedule those conversations, anything where we think we're gonna have an
Yeah.
impact, like sooner,
Mhm.
because we start the budget process in July.
Yep.
so.
Yep, and I think that's why we determined that August is the latest, that, you know, we're probably gonna be effective, right? Because then by,
For this year.
yeah, because
Right.
then by September, we'll be deep into budget meetings and,
Right.
you know, all of that, so.
So in that
okay.
case, I think the biggest impact that we could have on the budget would be in public safety.
Mhm.
So I don't know if maybe we wanna prioritize those conversations because they're more on a timeline.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
So I'm just kidding, don't write any of that stuff down in stone.
I'm noting it, but even though it's written in pen, you know, it's
Okay.
flexible, you know, I'm just putting down ideas. So I'll put down public safety as a potential, you know, for June, but we will, you know, we'll confirm these later.
I almost think like that one, I would like to talk to HR because
Mhm.
I think in HR and finance, there's probably maybe opportunities for shared services. And then public safety, I would put probably before DPW, honestly.
Okay.
Cause I think with public safety, a lot of the impact has to do with staffing and policy. And those are things that are determined, you know, during the budget process. DPW, there's so much to it. There's like opportunities for shared services, there's staffing and equipment. Like if we were gonna do those things, a lot of time, I think in most cases, they're structural changes that honestly, even if we started them now, I don't know if we would get them set up in time
Yeah.
to be effective in 2026. So I feel like those are less, they're very important, but less urgent,
Mhm.
in terms of having an impact on 2026. But that's just my thinking right now, and that's subject to change. And also, I'm only 25% of the committee, so.
I just wanted to throw some,
Yeah.
you guys are limited with your time as far
Yeah.
as between now and August, so if you
Right.
wanna put HR and finance in the same, you know, I'll be ready for you, so.
What if
mean,
we did
I-
public safety first and then HR and finance in April?
You wanna
Just-
take,
I'm
you
just
wanna
throwing
take
stuff
both
out.
police and fire on at the same time?
No, probably not.
That's public safety.
Well, when you put it like that, I mean, yeah, we'll have it sorted.
I think, I just want to say, in my perspective, Ginny, having your presence here is useful because of the broad overview you have, but I don't know that I have questions about the operation of the finance department per se, as opposed to the whole city budget. So I don't know that we need a special
A special meeting just to,
to talk about the functioning of the finance department, as opposed to bigger departments.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, I think we could do finance and HR at the same meeting, definitely. Because I think that, again, in terms of the mechanics of the city, like, those two departments really are kind of hand in hand, so there's a lot of integration there.
that's where we kind of started, so
Yeah.
we'll go back to that.
Okay.
Where
But
did we-
maybe in,
Yeah, so where do we
April
feel
or
like
May.
the next one would be, you know? Would that be public safety, or are we starting off, you know?
as Len mentioned, we have to separate them,
Mhm.
probably,
Yep,
fire
yep,
and police.
Police, fire, you know, alphabetical, not alphabetical, doesn't matter, but pick them out of a hat, you know,
Yeah.
do we wanna move right on to that discussion afterwards? Or do you still wanna kinda see how the next meeting goes and determine from there?
Well, I think we should push finance HR back to April to give time for us to really think about what we wanna get out of that conversation.
Okay.
Because I think, to your point, like, maybe the questions aren't as obvious, but I don't think that it's not worth exploring.
So what would you, if we did that, then what do you see us talking about for our next meeting then? Do you wanna spend the next meeting just developing these questions more? Do we wanna, you know, invite, police, invite Chief Witzenberg to talk with us more about that? Where are we, cause we started off that we wanted to kinda have HR finance as like our first
Overview,
and
I know.
overview, so now we're kind of switching up here.
I know, I'm just trying to
Right.
think about giving time.
So last
Yeah.
month, we said we were gonna bring the department heads in and allow them an opportunity to kind of explain the services that they provide. And then that would develop the questions, and I think, Mike, you said that earlier tonight, right? That we would be developing questions that night, and then the next month, give the department head 30 days to answer the.
Okay, I
Right.
see,
thoughts and
okay, so
answer
we're
the
talking about
questions.
having like the presentation and then the questions, okay, I
Right,
think I was
we-
thinking
we've kind of
about
switched
developing questions.
That's right.
Modalities on this, but I thought that's what we agreed
That's
to
right.
last month.
Okay, got it,
So then.
Yeah, or,
if
and
that-
I wasn't sure whether it was necessary for them to come both times, I guess it'd be useful, but I was thinking
Sure.
partly that we could, amongst us,
Right.
figure out what things we wanna learn.
okay.
Right, and
Thank
so
you.
if I'm gonna
Thank
take
you.
on public safety next month, for example, Katie, is that I would say an hour and a half is a good
Yeah.
format, so 45 minutes
Okay.
for each department head to do their presentation. And that will give us an opportunity to write down questions as they're doing their presentation. And then we can submit it to the department head.
Yep,
And they can either come back and answer the questions to us, and we can have back and forth, or they can answer the questions, which they do now via email.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think what would be most effective.
I'm just concerned that we're not gonna get everybody done before July.
Me too.
mhm, yeah,
There's no way, but that's
yeah, that's,
15 departments.
I know.
that's why we gotta figure out what are our top priorities, you know? So far I'm hearing HR, finance, police, fire, DPW, and OPT.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we just
How
need.
many is that? 6?
That is 6, yeah.
Okay. And
So
it's
read that
February.
list again, Elaine?
What's that?
Could you read that list again?
It would be HR, finance, DPW, fire, police, and OPT.
So if we did March, April, May, June, July, that would work.
And we
So-
did talk about combining HR and finance.
Right.
So,
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's what this was in my hand.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
neither
that's-
was me. Yeah, sorry.
Just to call back to the, hoping to narrow
Yeah.
things down a little bit, the departments we just listed are like 90% of what's listed as far as the services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you say DPW,
Yes.
we've had these multiple 3-hour presentations in the past, obviously, not everyone was here. Do we want a general presentation? Let's hear from
No.
Chief Knapp on everything the fire department does, or, and same thing with all the other departments, or are there certain services that you really wanna hone in on?
Yes.
Not necessarily so we have to answer tonight, but it could be something you think about.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
go through here, I mean, you've been highlighting as you go along, but especially with DPW, because there's 50
Yeah.
services listed here.
Yeah.
Are there certain things you really wanna learn more about? And then that way, the department has a little bit more, focus in preparing
Sure.
a presentation.
So can we potentially email a little bit as a group, maybe do a shared doc or something, and then maybe an email from the chair could go out to the department heads to say, like, these are some of our initial questions, right? And then, you know, we may have questions as we go on, but this is kind of what we're thinking now.
Yeah. The
But it's like
focus.
combined, and it's sort of, yeah, just an initial orientation about what we're thinking / what
Yeah, I
ideas
mean-
we have or whatever.
It's getting later, but I had hoped that we could brainstorm some questions tonight, but maybe
Sure.
doing it on email is fine. I do feel like there's some questions that sort of apply to almost every department of, you know, like, as department head, what do you see are places where, you know, where the budget's an issue, either like efficiencies you see or places where you never have enough money
Right,
to
yeah.
do what you need to do, you know, the sort of, a general question of like, that we heard about from Brian, the, you know, overtime and how that plays into your city, into your department's budget, what services are there, a lot of demand for, more demand for than you can really meet, what services are there that you provide, but that there's not that much that people ask.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I think I think this is where the last time I had suggested we might wanna even, ask in that kind of SWOT, way of doing, like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And that could even just be a general, like, this is what we're looking for, from the presentation. What do you feel like the strengths of the department are? What are what are the areas of weakness? What are, potential, like external threats and other opportunities, and that might be a way to focus it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe email's a good way to do it, because it's this sort of kind of thing that we all need to like write down some questions, and maybe if we throw it, just start throwing them into a document.
Right.
Yeah.
What I would say is, well, no. Sorry.
So I guess what we really need to determine then, we're still hesitating on where we're going for March. And,
Right.
what.
I would advocate for HR,
Yeah.
just because they have, their budget itself isn't that big, but they are sort of understand the personnel side of
Right.
every department's budget, and so,
Yeah.
for me anyway, cause I'm new to this, that would help me ground me in understanding how this whole ship sails.
And they were just restructured, so I think it would be helpful to get their perspective now.
Okay, so we'll go back to HR, and do we wanna still combine HR, finance?
I think so. Any specific questions that I have, I'm sure I could come up with pretty quickly, just from looking at the list, so,
We wanna submit them,
yeah, I'll submit them to Elaine.
can we, I was gonna say, can we just start a platform though, that all of us are participating in
Yeah.
the questions, so then we're not doubling up or.
Right.
Yeah, I would love that.
Do we want like a Google, like a shared doc, is that what we're looking for,
Yeah,
do you
I
think?
think so.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. Okay, so, HR
You
and
just need our
finance.
personal email, right, cause it won't work.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking is, I can at least start it and I can send it to you, just to get the ball rolling, and then
Right.
you can access it, I think, with your personal email, right?
Right, cause it won't
Yeah.
work with our city email.
Right, I think if I
But
send it to you though, you
you
should
can
be
send
able
us
to
the link,
access
You
it.
just
Right.
have
Yeah,
to
send
manage
us
the
the link,
access,
right.
Yeah.
and say anyone with the link.
Oh, that's right, yeah,
Yeah.
cause you guys will have to, okay. We'll figure that out. I can do that piece though. That is
Okay.
something I'm very capable of. Okay, so if we invite HR and finance for March, and you know, we'll have this list of questions, I'll send the invitation, oops, and tell them, you know, what our basic, you know, starter questions are to help them focus their presentation. So March, HR, finance. April, do we wanna go right into public safety then?
Sure.
Okay, who do we wanna start with?
I think I'd rather start with
Fire.
police. Did you say fire?
Mike,
No, Len
you're the
just.
tiebreaker now.
I would, since you're in the room, I would ask you, do you have a preference between April and May?
I thought we were gonna do both the same night, right?
Oh,
Let's just be respectful and have a time.
yes.
Right. So if you take on police and fire, I would say an hour and a half's the most.
Yeah,
45 minutes, because everybody's starting to get a
Yep.
little glazed over now.
Right.
Yeah.
yep. Okay, so we wanna put them down for the same?
Together?
Together, or do we
Okay.
wanna split them up?
We can try. We can try.
Good try.
We have a professional shaking his head over there.
I don't know how we could, how in 45 minutes we could, I mean, we could get the, we could ask them questions, get information from them, but we
Yeah.
can't.
No real brainstorming
Always
session.
continue the conversation.
No, I'd rather
45
have
minutes
one
is done.
person come and
All right.
Always-
dig in.
I think
Yeah.
we're gonna continually have questions.
Probably, but I think, you know, the idea is to, you know, if, with the number of meetings that we have and the number of departments, I think we can fit it in so that we have police 1 week, fire, or 1 month, sorry, fire the other month. Okay. So, strong feelings on where we start? I put down police, just because that's where I was writing, so I'll put down fire for May. All right, and then, do we then wanna move on to DPW for the next one?
Yes.
Okay, and then we'll have OPT, and August right now would kind of be like a wild card,
August?
I think. Yeah.
I think we're up to July, yeah, so we're up to June.
Yep. I put down, okay, I put down March, HR Finance, April, Police, May, Fire, June, DPW, July, OPT.
Okay.
And then August, we can kind of keep as a wild card for right now for those things that we may have questions that come up during the process or other things that we want to wrap up on, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then really the big action item right now is I need to get this shared doc out soon so that we can start working on that and send invites to folks. I mean, Ginny is right here, so she can hear the invite, but you know, I'll reach out to Dave too.
I can coordinate with department heads.
Okay.
And if you, whenever you have the questions
Oh,
out,
perfect.
just send them to me and I'll look for them.
Okay, all right, anything else then, because I know it is getting late and I want to make sure that we can all, you know, late until DC meeting. This
I
week too,
think-
so, yeah,
That we should set ourselves a deadline of when we're gonna get these questions.
oh, as far as compiling the questions,
Yeah.
yeah, like I can get the Google Doc out in a day or two, and then what, give ourselves like a week?
Yeah, I would say by, Monday.
Yeah.
To have everything.
The March 25th is our next, all right, so, yeah, can we do it by next week's council meeting? Is that realistic, or do we need to, one more time on that?
So maybe finish it by Monday and I can get it to Greg by Tuesday? That sound good?
Yeah, that's good for me.
I'm gonna go to-
All right. Anything else? That, is everything on the agenda?